So we talked about ethnic groups when we left on Friday. And so we're going to talk about 3 different ethnic groups, and then we're going to talk about the 3 main religions. And that's how we're going to finish up. It's a whole bunch of information. So the first ethnic group we'll talk about is Arabs. Arabs make up a majority of the people in the Middle East. Almost all Arabs practice Islam, and the overwhelming majority of those are Sunnis. So there's 2 types of Islam being practiced in the Middle East and North Africa. There's Sunnis and there's Shiites. Okay, we'll get to Sunnis and Shiites in about 12 slides from now, but we're going to get there. And the majority of them, whether they're Muslim or Christian, speak Arabic. This is a picture, you don't need to, this is just how Islam was spread. You can see when the Roman Empire split up, okay, we talked about that. You had the Carolinians, and then you had the whole thing from Rome, from Italy to the east. Well, that was all known as the Byzantine Empire. We didn't talk a ton about the Byzantine Empire, but basically, the Byzantine Empire was all of that area. So the green, the dark blue, the light purple, the lavender, the lilac, all those pretty colors on the right-hand side. Okay, that was all the Byzantine Empire. That whole area was Islamic. One of the main splits between the two was like Rome, Italy, and to the west was all Christian. And when Rome went Christian, the Byzantine Empire went, nope, we're not Christian. The next group we'll talk about is the Persians. The Persians lived in what is now modern-day Iran. So we talked about the Sunnis and their particular type of Islamic religion. The other one is the Shia. The Shia is what most of the Persian people practice. They speak their own language, so a lot of those people speak Arabic. In the Persian culture group, they speak Farsi. Okay, Persian, last time we talked about the Persians, Alexander the Great was invading and responding to the Persian invasion. The Persians invaded Greek a whole bunch of times. You can see the map there, it keeps changing as the different empires roll through Persia. But we talked about Xerxes. Xerxes invaded Greece. He fought the Spartans and the Battle of Thermopylae. I know that's not ringing a bell by the looks on your face, but that's okay. Trust me, it happened. So the Arabs is basically Saudi Arabia, Syria, a little bit of Egypt, into the West Bank and Israel a little bit. So that whole area is like, the Arabic nation kind of has a place. The Persians, that's Iran. Persians kind of got a place. So the Arabs speak Arabic, the Persians speak Farsi, and then the last group that we'll talk about in this region is the Kurds. The Kurds don't really have a place of their own. Like, Saudi Arabia is Arabic. Iran's Persian. The Kurds just kind of float around into a variety of different spots. They're in Turkey, they're in Syria, they're in Iraq, they're in Iran. This area that they kind of live in is called Kurdistan, but it's not a country, it's not a defined space. It just kind of, these are where all the Kurdish people live. Again, Muslim, Sunni, they also speak their own language, Kurdish. So, now that you have the ethnic groups, we're going to talk about all the religions. So I've referenced this a couple times, and we'll dive deeper into it right now. But one of the things that causes the most tension in this area is these three religious groups. A religious group is a group of people that share the same belief, whether it's the same belief in gods, whatever they, or God or gods, and they have the same sacred texts, and they have the same, those sacred texts kind of outline their moral code. The three would be Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. You can see right there, the six-pointed star is the Star of David. That's Judaism. Cross, Christianity, and the moon and the star is Islam. So a couple things that we should remember. All three of these religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they all originated in the Middle East. Jerusalem is the holiest city for the Jews and the Christians, and it's the third holiest city for the Muslims. The other thing that's unique, and another thing that causes some of the conflict, is that all three of these religions trace their foundation back to one person, Abraham. Now, Judaism and Christianity are very, very similar, right up until the point where we start talking about Jesus. That's where Judaism and Christianity diverge. And the thing that's unique with the Muslim faith, or the Islamic faith, is that they incorporate all of it. So they take a little bit of the Old Testament, they take, like, Muhammad met Jesus. Okay? They just have a different interpretation of who the Messiah is. We'll get into each one a little bit more detail here in a minute. So you're going to get a crash course in Judaism. Now, I'm not going to sit here and go into a lot of detail about these things, but I'm going to give you the real quick basics. Up until Judaism was founded, and we talked about a whole bunch of religions in world history, they had multiple gods. So the Egyptians, multiple gods. The Romans, multiple gods. The Greeks, multiple gods. Again, gods to explain sun goes up, sun goes down, war, hunting, fishing, farming, on and on and on. We talked about all these different gods and a lot in world history. So far in geography, we've talked about Asia, and you have Hindu, which has Vishnu and a few other gods, multiple gods. You have Shinto. Okay, Shinto is more of a spirits than it is gods. But you pray to the good spirits, the kami, to ward off the evil spirits. Buddhism is kind of the same way. It's about balance and spirits. Okay, so this is the first time that you have a one God religion. Okay, Abraham is the founder of Judaism and monotheism. And monotheism, again, is the belief in one God. So God told Abraham, go to Israel. In the Bible, it's called Canaan. And he promised this land to all of his descendants. Okay? The book of the Torah is like the Bible. The Torah and the Bible, similar. It's the first 5 books of the Old Testament, is what the Torah is. Now, there's more in the Torah than just the first 5 books, because our first 5 books of the Christian Bible stops. You know what I mean? Like the Torah keeps expanding on these things, but it has all these, there's more than 5 books in the Old Testament, obviously. Okay, so the first 5 books are the same, and then they kind of deviate from that. But basically, the Torah is the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Also, they believe that the Messiah will come, but he has not come yet. And that's where we kind of split off from Christianity. So there's the Western Wall in Jerusalem. So Christianity, you should all be fairly familiar with it, regardless of what particular sect of Christianity you are in or around. But realistically, you should all have a basic understanding. Monotheistic. Jesus is the Son of God. He's the Messiah, also known as Christ. The whole thing is based off of, if you sin, you can be forgiven of your sins and accepted by God and offered salvation, the promise of eternal life. And the big thing is, people are saved by God's grace and acceptance of Christ as the Savior. So when you go to church on Sunday, if you've never been to church, either, whatever happens, typically there's a couple things that you do at a church just about every Sunday. You say a creed of some sort, whether it's the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed, or pick a creed. But the creed says, hey, I believe these things. The other thing is you say the Lord's Prayer. Lord's Prayer kind of outlines all these things as well. Basically say, hey, this is what I believe, this is what I accept, these are the things. Okay? Again, Bible starts with the first 5 books, same as same as the book of Torah. Okay, so the Torah, the Bible, start out the same, have the same beginnings. Okay, Abraham, Isaac, all the things. Sodom, Gomorrah, all of the things. Okay, the difference is that the Torah stops, and then you have the New Testament. Okay, so Jesus is in the Christian religion, Jesus is the Messiah. In the Jewish religion, we're still looking for that guy. There's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Well, I guess another thing that you should realize about Christianity is like Jesus was born a Jew. John the Baptist, all the major players in the Bible, right up until this Friday, are all Jews. After Friday and then Easter Sunday, then we start that conversion process to Christianity. But apostles, John the Baptist, they're all Jews. So now we'll talk about Islam, the one that you know the least about. Monotheistic, started in Saudi Arabia, founded by the Prophet Muhammad. And Muhammad is never pictured. Okay? Quite a few years ago now, probably before you were born, there was a comic strip done in Scandinavia somewhere. I don't remember if it's Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Norway, somewhere in Scandinavia. There was somebody that wrote a comic strip, and they drew a picture of Muhammad. There was some Islamic extremists that went and murdered the person who drew the picture, because Muhammad is never pictured. There's no drawings, there's no paintings, there's no nothing of Muhammad. And if you do that, you do it with, if it's one of those deals where, like, let's say you drew a picture of Muhammad, took a picture of it, put it on the internet, you could potentially face some dire repercussions. Just so you remember that. So here is the Kebab Mecca in Saudi Arabia. There's the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. So, Judaism, Christianity start the same. Islam starts the same. All three of these religions start exactly the same way. They use exactly the same books. They get to different points and they diverge in where their story goes and how they continue. Okay? So we've talked about Judaism and Christianity. Islam starts with Abraham. Muhammad and Jesus were happening about the same time. So like Jesus and Muhammad, as the story goes, they were aware of each other, met up, all those things. The thing that happened is Muhammad dies, and they split into two different groups because they are arguing over who gets to take control of this new church after Muhammad dies. So the Sunnis want a member of the Muslims to choose the caliph. Now, maybe you've seen that word caliph before, maybe you haven't, but it's a Jewish high priest. Okay, so you're going to hear, if you go to church, you're going to hear about Judas going to see Caiaphas and all these. The people that Judas goes to see to sell out Jesus is the caliph. Same words, same things, same structure in a lot of these things. So they wanted the caliph to decide who, that's the council of high priests, to decide who succeeds Muhammad. And the person that they picked was the father of one of Muhammad's wives, a guy by the name of Abu Bakr. The Shia thought that the person who should take over after Muhammad should be related to Muhammad. Okay, so the Sunnis said, okay, Muhammad was married to this person, her father should be the next in line. The Shia said, no, it's got to be somebody related to Muhammad. So they picked Muhammad's cousin and the husband of his daughter Fatima. Okay, so Muhammad had a daughter, and the daughter's name was Fatima, and her husband, Ali ibn Abi Talib, should be the next leader of the Islamic faith. So you don't need this, okay? The Sunnis and the Shia, they both are sparked from Muhammad. You can see Muhammad died in 632. You can see the tree. You have Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and that's where the Sunnis go. The Shia go right to Ali, and then Hassan, and then they split again. They kind of agree on those two. Okay, Ali, Hassan, great, and then they split again because Hussein and Muawiyah, again, Hussein is related to Muhammad. And the whole succession of the Shia religion, they have to be in some way, shape, or form related to Muhammad. That'd be like saying, so in Christianity, like Peter is the rock of the church, and he's the one that kind of gets the whole Christianity ball rolling. Well, that'd be like, okay, well, it has to be Mary's brother's kid is the next person to take over Christianity. So that's kind of the differential. Like the Sunnis, like, okay, well, this is the next person, they can take the ball and run with it. The Shia have to be related to the guy in order to know anything about the deal. You can see the green are the Shia, the red are the Sunni. So there's a few Islamic customs. One is known as a hijab. The hijab is the headscarf that's worn by women for a couple of reasons. One is because of modesty. One could be expressing their Muslim identity. The lady on the bottom, I cannot remember her name for the life of me when I made it 3 years ago. She is from Ohio, married a Muslim who was a terrorist, and she was thought to be held against her will. And then they went to like, they thought that she got kidnapped. They went to save her, and she's like, no, I want to be. Cannot remember her name for the life of me, though. I looked at her picture, and it just, my mind went blank. The other thing that you probably have heard of or might have heard of is a jihad. Jihad is a word that has two separate meanings. There's the popular culture meaning, and then there's the Muslim or the Islamic faith meaning. A jihad is just an internal struggle to live up to faith, whatever that thing is. Okay? And to defend the Islamic religion. The last piece of that is where it gets confusing, because it says with force if necessary. So what happens is you have a whole bunch of Islamic extremists who use the force whether it's necessary or not. Those are terrorists. They're not a true representation of the Islamic faith. Okay, those are the people that take it to an extreme. There's people that do a whole bunch of extreme things. There's people that are the Baptist Church in Texas. I can't remember the name of the thing, but they're the ones that sit outside and protest when soldiers' funerals, because we shouldn't be over there and all these things. So there's a whole bunch of extreme groups that you might not believe in or agree with, but the with force if necessary is the piece that the terrorists have latched onto. So I talked to you about the cartoonists that got killed because they drew a picture of Muhammad. That was a jihad by an extreme group or extreme person that took that one step too far. So we've talked about the three religions that make up the area. Now we'll talk about some of the issues that they've had. Okay? It all stems from this area right here. You can see there's Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, but that strip right there is known as Palestine. There's something known as the Zionist movement. The Zionist movement wanted an area where Jewish people could call their own in Palestine. It's their holy place. They wanted an area carved out. World War II happened, and Hitler rounded up and killed 6 million Jews. After World War II, Great Britain asked the United Nations and helped dividing up this area between the Jews and the Arabs so that they could have this land that they were once promised. And so the United Nations split up this land. You can see the green area is where the Arabs are. The yellow area is where the Jewish people are. And then the red area is nobody's property. So the red area has Bethlehem and Jerusalem. Okay? So they drew up this map, and the Jews said, yeah, looks good to us. And the Arabs said, nope. And the United Nations went, well, too bad this is happening. And so at one time before this started to happen, the majority of that would have been green. The majority of that is Arab. There is Jewish people living in there. They're living semi-peacefully, but they're each trying to carve out their own space. So, after the creation of this, there's 3 separate wars that took place. Each one of these wars basically ended the same way. On the night that this was going to take place, the night that Israel was created, a combined Arab force between the Egyptians, the Iraqis, the Jordanians, the Syrians, the Lebanese, the Saudis, and the Yemeni troops all attacked these areas that the Jewish people were going to take control of. The Jewish people not only defended the land that the Arabic people attacked, but they also expanded their territory. "20 years later, the 6-Day War, the Soviet Union and Syria gave these fake reports that Israel was preparing to attack Syria. Again, this is all a ploy to take back land from the Jewish people. So in Egypt, the president of Egypt, a guy by the name of Nasser, sent troops into Sinai. Sinai is an area that was controlled by the Arabs, and he tries to take some of this land away from the Jewish people because, again, he was convinced by the Russians that the Israeli people are going to invade this territory, so he's trying to beat them to the punch. As the name would indicate, the war lasted 6 days. After these 6 days, Israel tripled in size. They took the Gaza Strip, the Golan Heights, the Sinai Peninsula, and the West Bank. Every time that Israel is attacked, they win and they expand. The thing that the Arabic people in the region didn't realize, take into account, is that Israel is an ally of the most powerful countries in the world. Okay, the United States, Great Britain. Great Britain is the reason it became a thing. The United States sends a whole bunch of funding there. So they have tanks, they have bombs, they have guns, they have missiles, they have all these things that nobody else has. So, like, if this whole class tries to attack me, because they have a whole bunch more people, and you all have rocks and knives, and I have a 50 caliber machine gun, guess what? You're losing. You're losing bad. And then wherever you came from, I'm moving there and taking your land too. So, like, I live a block away from Isaac. Isaac attacks me, and I lose, so I'm moving into your house. You can keep the dog, I'm taking the house. And if your grandma and grandpa got a problem with it, taking them next. So there you can see, okay, on the right-hand side is where we started, on the left-hand side is where we finished. There's the Sinai Peninsula, so when Egypt attacked Israel, that was the area they fought over. There you can see where Israel started. You can see the Gaza Strip, there's the West Bank, there's the Golan Heights. Okay, so the Golan Heights, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and the Sinai Peninsula were all Arabic controlled. As soon as Egypt attacks, that whole thing is now taken over by Israel. So the first two wars, the Arab-Israeli War and the Six-Day War, went really bad for the Arabic community. The Yom Kippur War, even though they didn't win, was a little bit more even. So Syria and Egypt, still upset of how the Six-Day War ended, launched a surprise attack in Israel. The difference with this attack is now the Russians were supplying the Arabs with the military equipment they needed to be more successful. Again, Israel is still being supplied by the United States and Great Britain with their military equipment. Next year in world history, we'll talk about a whole bunch. It happened in Cuba, it happened in Korea, it happened in Vietnam. The United States, and it happened in Afghanistan. The United States and the Soviet Union would just give you a gun and you a gun and say, fight. And whoever wins, my side's better. They did it a whole bunch throughout from the end of the World War II until present day, to be honest with you. They just kept doing it over and over and over. The difference, the ending of the Yom Kippur War ended a little bit different. So the first two wars ended with just Israeli domination. This one was negotiated by a guy by the name of Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger was the United States Secretary of State at the time. He negotiated the end of this peace because it wasn't just a blowout victory. And it made Israel realize that, hey, we're not always going to be the superior force in this region. We need to work and try and figure this out with our neighbors. So the next thing in this relationship was something known as the Camp David Accords. Israel and Egypt, because those were the two that did the majority of the fighting against each other. Syria was in the mix, but realistically Syria was just, the only reason Syria was in the mix is because Egypt said, okay, let's go. So Israel and Egypt got together and signed a treaty with Jimmy Carter at Camp David, which is basically the lake house of the American presidents. So the way it worked is Israel said, okay, you can have the Sinai Peninsula back as long as you recognize us as a country. Because it wasn't necessarily that Israel wanted this area, but they were fighting to defend themselves, and none of the other neighbors recognized that they were actually a thing. So like, hey, you can have all this land back, but you got to recognize us as a country. And the big thing is it made the all-out war between Israel and the Arabic nations less likely. Now they're still fighting a whole bunch of battles. They still fight today. Within the last 2 months, there was still an attack, and it's never ending. It's never going to end, realistically. But the wars after the Yom Kippur War has kind of ended. Now it just becomes 50 people attack this thing, 100 people attack that thing, 1,000 people do this, and 25 people die. Not great, but better. Hello? Yep. Yep. Jossie.
Hello? Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
So now that we're done with all of the conflict, we'll finish up with a couple things here. One of the things in this region that is unique to this region is the fact that there's a whole bunch of nomadic lifestyles. So there's people that don't necessarily live in one area for an extended period of time. They don't sit down roots. They don't farm because farming isn't really doable. And so they just kind of go back and forth across the desert. They usually have herds, whether it's herds of camels or herds of sheep, and they go from oasis to oasis for a short time to feed and water whatever their cattle. The last one that we'll cover, and I'll send the notes to everybody, because I realize we've done 2.5 days of notes in a class period. That was not my initial intent, but the weather's forced my hand. So everybody will get the notes, just so we're on the same page. So the last thing we'll talk about here is the population, and like other parts that we've just talked about, especially Southwestern Asia, India, and a little bit of China, these areas are becoming rapidly urbanized, meaning that all the oil and all the money that comes with all the oil makes these places go from a smaller town to these large booming metropolises. Even though there's still a whole bunch of areas, much like China, where they have these great big cities, and then they still have, like, removed an hour from these great big cities, they still have these very traditional villages. Large percentage of the population is under 15 years old, and much like we talked about in other areas, it is unevenly distributed, with the desert being nobody and the coast having large areas.